Hello, everybody. First and foremost, thank you all for joining us here today. And hope you're enjoying the first day of BlockSplit. So today we have a fireside chat here with myself and by my side over here, Bruno. And we're going to be talking about all the things, gaming, Metaverse, NFTs, and everything combined together. So before we start, let's do a brief introduction. Bruno, I take the mic to you, and then I can do a short intro on my end.
All right, thanks. I'm Bruno. I founded RMRK, which is a protocol for NFT 2.0 standards, which we just recently finalized as ERCs for EVM chains. That's pretty much it. I'm into utility NFTs that can, do more than static media, and I try to push that aggressively through reputation, collaborative music, collaborative media, and other fun stuff.
Awesome. So I'm Josip. I'm leading the innovation and creativity at RZLT, which is essentially a Web3 growth agency. I'm also a member of the sub-DAOs of the Nouns and deeply involved in the NFT generative art movements and all of the other things combined. So to have like a first question, and I know that there's a lot of people who've been asking me, especially when I talk to people who are not in the Web3 space, what's the main difference between Metaverse and gaming in general? So Bruno, if you have an answer for it.
Between Metaverse and gaming?
Yeah, essentially open world gaming, Metaverse, all in the Web3 space, right?
Doesn't have to be. I have a definition for the Metaverse which pretty closely follows the original definition from Snow Crash, which would be that a Metaverse is any virtual environment in which reasonably unique representations of real humans can interact with each other and then own the experience of that interaction, and where the environment that they're in can be governed and modified by the users of that environment themselves. That's it. Now, this, if you kind of think about it, this kind of matches a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a game environment. It can be a lot of different things, It can be a DeFi app, it can be a forum, or it can be a game, or a lot of things. But the important part is the ability for its openness of the platform, the ability of participants to change the platform, and the ability of those participants to own the experience of interacting with other users. Own the experience. So if you take your avatar with you, you take that experience with you. That's, I think, the crucial part. And that I think, is the ingredient of Metaverse that all of the Metaverses that are out right now are missing.
So do you think by this definition that, I mean, you've answered the question essentially, but have you seen any platform in terms of the Metaverse which is not missing that ingredient now, which is working on it? I know that you've been working on the Skybridge, but have you seen other implementations where essentially this is the case with other platforms, be that EVM-based or else?
There's nobody working on a decentralized Metaverse right now. All Metaverses out there right now are varying degrees of online multiplayer games that use just the balance of a token in a wallet to log you in instead of a username and password. And that's it. Some of them take it a little bit further and have equipables and sellable items inside of that application or game, but the game itself is still centralized, running on a server that runs on AWS or something like that, and it can very easily disappear along with all of the experience. You will not own your experience of having interacted with that world, and that's the crucial missing part. So no, there are no real Metaverses.
Okay, and if we go into a bit, let's just touch upon the bit of the gaming aspect of it, because we see a lot of Web3 games coming out of nowhere, getting a lot of funds, raising a lot of funds essentially, be that Animoca Venture Studios or else. What do you think in terms of the adoption? We haven't seen any sort of a game from AAA titles, Steam, Epic Games. We haven't seen any of them adopt the Web3. What do you think are some of the missing ingredients when it comes to that? When it comes to the onboarding of the traditional user towards the Web3 space in gaming?
Yeah, a lot of good games are not exactly really easy to play. And learning to play a game well takes effort. Making that journey harder by introducing wallets and passwords and passphrases and security, nobody really wants that. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the stigma of Web3 and NFTs, where everything has been just static media so far. Naturally, everybody feels a very negative emotion when NFTs are mentioned. In fact, if you talk about NFTs on game-related conferences like Revolt or GDC, you will almost universally encounter frowns and negative feedback rather than curiosity. And this is purely because of the stigma of NFTs, because they are seen as a grift, which in the play-to-earn space is what they are. And in the current metaverse space is basically what they are. And the third problem is that most AAA developers have no incentive to add NFTs into the mix because they've been sold the wrong technology. They keep telling these game companies, add NFTs so that people can trade your, I don't know, whatever in the game. They can already trade their things in the game. They don't care about your Web3 vision. And they are not being told they're not being told about the massive pile of money, and let's be frank here, AAA publishers really mostly care about money. They're not being told about the massive pile of money that they're leaving on the table by ignoring cross-game compatible equipables and royalties that could come from that. So while we pester the AAA publishers with simple NFTs, integrate my ape, of course they're not going to do that because it doesn't make sense for them. They're definitely not going to turn your Fortnite rifle into an NFT because it doesn't make sense for them. And because they're being sold the completely wrong technology to integrate. So these three things in combination make sure that AAA developers will never adopt NFTs as they are. They need to adopt a different type of technology, not the current type of NFTs that they're being pushed on.
So do you have like to touch upon this, do you have like an example of this technology that they might be able to do it?
Well, as it happens, I do. No, really, but so with one of our standards, what we've if you go to those gaming conferences, what most of the gamers complain about is you tell them this gun skin can be an NFT, and they will tell you first they'll tell you get away from me. And then when you chase them, they'll tell you, I don't need this. I don't want this. I don't care that it can be an NFT because I can sell it on the in-game marketplace anyway. And then you tell them, like, but it could also be a skin for a knife in Counter-Strike. And then they say, no, it can't because it's a different engine and the skin is different and you can't pull one from the other. It doesn't work. So again, get away from me. But if you use actual advanced tech and not just links to images, which are basically NFTs as they are today, then you can solve that problem. Because if you use a standard that allows you to have two different skin files in the same NFT, then that skin file can be applied to one game and the other game. And it depends on the player or the owner where they're going to take that skin file, where they're going to equip it. Additionally, if I show up in Fortnite with a Counter-Strike skin on my gun, people are going to ask me, that's a really cool skin. Where'd you get it? And I'm going to say, in that other game. And then they're going to go play. And so you have a cross-pollination of player bases that these publishers are just not aware of because nobody's telling them about it. Everybody's telling them, add my ape to this game. You know?
Got it. So essentially, also on the... There's essentially a big problem with the onboarding, but on the other end of spectrum, when you go into the Web3 gaming space currently, we see a lot of play to earn, run to earn, X to earn, whatever it is. Like they put all the buzzwords there. Type of game models. Do you think that this is essentially sustainable in Web3 space?
No, of course not. So the something to earn model is the DEX model of games, where you basically program in a downward price momentum into your token from the get-go. If you have to bribe your players to keep playing your game, you are basically, committing to failure. It doesn't work and it cannot work. Yield farming doesn't work in decentralized exchanges. Yield farming doesn't work in games. That's not how things should work. A game should be... There's a reason why AAA publishers or even AA publishers don't even tell you that they're building a game until they're 5 years in and 10 to 15 discarded prototypes in. Because they validate an idea, a demo, before they even start raising money. In Web3, it's the absolute opposite. People raise money on a PDF and then start thinking, maybe we're game developers, let's try and build something. And so now they're going to fork a Unity template and come up with a platformer and call it a Web3 game. That's just not how things should work. So none of this is sustainable unless people really change this. I mean, we all know what's going on. Like, none of these teams actually want to build a good game. They're all just trying to make money. It's like, it's okay. It's fine to admit that. But to make a good game, you have to start with the game and not the tokenomics and not the bribing mechanism. You have to start with a good game.
Yeah, you have to start with the gameplay first and then validate the gameplay and then see what you can do in terms of the monetary aspect. And essentially, when we're in the touch on the metaverse and the gaming in general, there's a lot of, like, if we look at it from the transactional side, we have blockchain, right? And then when we combine all those games which are in different chains, we go multi-chain and all the stuff connected with it. But when we look at it on the front end side of things, let's say it like that, we see that there's no 3D standardization, right? So my question to you now is, do you think that at some point we're going to have a standardized 3D formats of some sort, where essentially you will be able to, let's say, you have a skin in X game, you can convert it into the, you can convert that skin into the other game without needing to make another skin, essentially, right? Do you think we're going to come to that point?
I'm sure that's possible. I'm not an expert on this, so I don't want to really talk about something I don't know much about. But I see it as something that is possible, but not exactly desirable. Because ultimately, there's no guarantee that it's going to translate well. Technology moves really quickly, resolution moves really quickly, and even if you come up with a standard that just remaps a texture to a different model, that other product might be a much more higher res and therefore stretch your texture in a very bad way. There's no way to guarantee forward compatibility of 2D non-scalable assets unless you involve, I don't know, AI upscaling of different kinds and so on. So this is way out of my ballpark. I don't really know about the front-end stuff. I know that standards like this would be beneficial and would be interesting to have. But as a holy grail for games, I don't think so. I think there's going to be a need for human touching up and just added perfection so that these assets are not just lazy translations, but instead are dedicated artworks that are specific to these environments that you want them in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially if you have if you have a 3D model to convert it into the 2D, you need a human touch essentially onto that aspect, right? When we look at, in general, gaming market is huge. We've touched upon a bit on the AAA side of things, but the other part of the gaming market, which is really big, is mobile. And, from hyper casual to games like Candy Crush to whatever it is, right? So have you seen some of the examples where maybe Web3 touches upon that, or?
Yeah, there are two examples come to mind. I really like what World Wide Web, or whatever they call it, is doing. Okay. I really like what they're making, even though the backend is centralized and all of that, but the actual playability is very good. The interaction is very good. It's all very smooth. It's very easy to get into the game. It works relatively well. And it's highly extensible, which is a very good feature to have. I think that one has really high potential in becoming kind of like our Web3 modern version of Habbo Hotel. Okay. And I'm looking forward to seeing that evolve. The other one is, and I forget the name, but there was a shooter which you could very easily just join through a link on your mobile. And you would literally be dropped right in the middle of an FPS level, and it would look good. It's a good-looking 3D game that you just fire up on your phone, and you can run around and shoot with virtual joysticks on your phone. And the time to play is like 15 seconds for a 3D game that just loads without login, without anything.
Was it Web3 based?
Was it?
Web3, it did have was
No,
it the,
I mean, it did have Web3 elements, like, you know, items and stuff
Okay.
in the game, but it was running centralized. But in terms of UX, this is, I think, what we should aim for. So time to play, minimizing time to play, minimizing time to interaction in games is extremely important. If we want people to, you know, play this Web3 game while they sit on the toilet, we want them to be able to start playing before they're done on the toilet. And so time to interaction has to be extremely low. And these two examples, I think, are very good in terms of what can be done. But we'll see how much they manage to decouple from the centralized aspects of these games. Yeah.
and then when you touch upon essentially, especially if we're looking at the mobile market, right? You have Web3 wallets, which, as you said, if the user who's in the Web2 needs to create a Web3 wallet, is going to be a bit of a lengthy process for the first time onboarding of them, right? Where do you see the, let's say, custodial wallets like login with Facebook or something like that being a part of it, like for the Web2 massive adoption, or you see everything to be completely decentralized and for the users to make the wallets themselves?
So I don't actually care about Web3 gaming in terms of Web3 and gaming.
Yeah.
I care more about teaching people that they can own something they didn't expect they could own before. And I think Web3 gaming is a good Trojan horse for that. I think a smooth login experience, like what we've seen with Near at this conference, where you can just generate a wallet using your Gmail account and then export it later, is very important for the casual user. And I think that's a very good approach. But we also need to be very aggressive in teaching them how to then, you know, export that experience and take it with them and teach them that they actually now own something they didn't expect to own. So I think it's a double-edged sword, kind of, where you make things too easy and then people forget about the security part that we want them to learn about. But also it's a very effective Trojan horse in all of that, which I would love to see more in various apps. Maybe not log in with Facebook, but generating a key based on your Gmail or whatever, you know, Near is doing for this, I think is a good idea, because it can't very easily be stolen. And, you know, it is Web 2 in terms of generating things, but it's also what I call progressive centralization. Progressive centralization is where whatever you build starts out decentralized. It works fully decentralized. It cannot go down. It just works. It doesn't work smoothly. It's not comfortable to use, but it works. And then you progressively centralize. You build UX comfort on top, which can be an indexer, which can be a new login option, which can be whatever you want, however centralized you want. But the condition is, if all of these centralized components fail at the same time, the thing still works. And so this is kind of what I see with these Near wallets. So if their provider, if the API fails and you no longer can generate a wallet using your Gmail because the server is down, it still works locally to generate a seed as you would expect usually when making a Web3 wallet. So I would love to see more of this user experience flow in general, not just in games, but also all sorts of apps.
Yeah. But I see also, I mean, I completely agree with you on this standpoint, and we've seen this with a couple of activations that we did essentially with VRC, World Rally Championship and stuff like that, where people were onboarded, and then later down the line, we've also asked them to export their private keys, so they know they know that they own that asset essentially, and I think that's a clear path to adoption, plus also to teach essentially the people about the possibilities of Web3. And do you think that, when all being said and done, one of the biggest barriers that I see now especially is that, you know, there's a big decentralization happening in the gaming space, in the mobile gaming space and everything, where you have key players such as App Store, whatever it is, Google Play, and then you have the Steam, you have, I don't know, I think it's Origin, Epic Store, whatever it is. Do you think that they're going to start to allow essentially the applications to be up and running in terms of the NFT side of things? Because I know that Apple Store currently said no to the NFTs, and you're not able to publish a game?
Well, Apple Store said no just because they want their tax. They're not anti-crypto, they're anti-not getting money. So if you can somehow make sure they get their part of the, their take, they will allow it. It's just that they don't really understand what they're asking, and they're asking for 30% of every single transaction, which you can't really, if I send you the NFT directly, I can't really take that gas fees 30% and send it to them, which is what they expect according to their rules. So eventually, yes, they will allow it because everybody's going to be using it and the outrage will be too big, but it's going to be an uphill battle for sure because, again, it's not in their best interest to allow Web3 stuff. Once they let NFTs in, it's kind of a slippery slope to let other stuff in, which means that they could fall into allowing direct crypto transactions in apps, which will directly impact the tax that they're collecting. So I understand their hesitancy to add this because it directly threatens them. It makes sense. So I think a better option is to just encourage alternative ways to load these Web3 apps, mainly through browsers, and just avoiding app stores altogether, just focusing on that in-browser experience, like that shooter that you can just fire up and it just works. I think the rising popularity of WASM will help us do this. Just faster and faster devices will mean more and more things are possible when you're running WASM code on your device, and we will soon hopefully be able to completely avoid app stores and their monopoly. Yeah.
I see a lot of games going into the. I mean, and the experience is changing. Like for the last decade, we had the App Store, we had the Google Play, but then now more and more are switching into due to the bandwidth, due to everything that technology that's available, everybody's switching onto the browser-based experiences, which I think is amazing. And for the last question, where do you see this going? The metaverse, the gaming. Do you think that we're in some sort of a verge where we're gonna start to see this adoption of traditional users, or we're still really far away from it?
We're still really far away from it because nobody's really working on something good. Like, even those with experience in highly addictive and fun games still fail. I tried recently to get myself addicted to the Mighty Doom game, mobile version of Doom, where you top-down shooter for Doom. It is designed, it's like textbook microtransaction game. Like lots of crystals, XP points, you shoot, everything is happening. But after a week, it just faded out of me. I couldn't care less about it. And I compared it to the experience with the similar Star Wars game that was, I forget what the name was, but also mobile. And that one kept me engaged much longer. And so you can clearly identify some missing parts, even in these microtransaction-oriented Web2 games, where you're missing the competitive side, you are being bombarded with a too complex UI, the game economy of energy to spend versus demand to play is out of balance, stuff like that. And so when you need to keep all of that in mind and design a Web3 experience on top, and you want to add a token into the mix, it's not a good recipe. Web3 teams in general are not very good at tokenomics design. Most tokens are developed and designed to trend towards zero because they are. And then if you ask them to come up with a whole economy for an entire game and balance all of those other things that they have zero experience in, it's not exactly a recipe for mass adoption. I want this to happen, but I think it's going to happen sooner from the direction of things like Roblox than from within Web3.
Yeah, so essentially the existing companies in the Web2 adopting the technology towards their needs and building upon it. Awesome. I think that...
Any questions?
Yes, we have a couple of...
Or feedback, or
anything.
Whatever. If you have a disagreeing opinion or something, yeah.
Yeah, so I know you said you don't really care about the gaming part of Web3, but any thoughts on how it's going to scale? You can't be spending a shitload of gas on these microtransactions. What do you think about chains and roll-ups and this sort of stuff?
So the question was about scaling of the games and the transactions and whether or not roll-ups can save us. So there's varying degrees of what you want to save on chain. There's stuff that you want to keep off chain until you commit it. So roll-ups make sense in a non-interactive environment where you're interacting only with the world and you don't have effect on anybody else. And so at that point, you can, harvest 100 strawberries, kill 50 boars, and I don't know, skin 17 rabbits. And then you commit all of that into one transaction, and it works because you didn't really affect anybody else. When you're interacting with other people, things get much more complicated, and you need to move into a turn-based environment where you have to do transactions sparingly. There are methods to get around this with it is kind of like an optimistic roll-up where you collect interactions between two players, but then allow them to dispute what happened between them. And if nobody disputes at the closing window of that interaction, whether that's just exploring a piece of land together or literally being in combat or something, then it's committed to the chain. But until then, it's all off chain. So there are ways to avoid this. But since nobody's actually working on a decentralized metaverse of this type, we'll never know until we have some prototype to play with and break. And I don't really have even an inkling when that might happen. We're seeing, like with World Wide Web, right? They have a really good throughput. They can support a lot of players at the same time. But that's just piping through a centralized server that's just WebSocketing players together into a screen. That's not committing anything to a chain. And the players can't really interact with each other on chain in any way. Nothing happens between them. But they can go into a store and buy or sell an item, and that is a chain operation. That can be an on-chain operation. But it doesn't affect anybody else, except in the part that the supply in the store decreases or increases. So when the interactions between players become real, then we'll see how people have tackled it. There are ways, but I don't see anything revolutionary coming up right now. And mostly it's just centralized on the server, so we'll see. But I don't think roll-ups that allow you to put every single move on chain are the solution at all. That's never going to work.
Hi. So I'm pretty excited about Web3 and gaming, and I know you kind of are on the fence about that and like where it should start. The fact that we're even here and we have Web3 native teams building gaming is like pretty exciting because it's taken a long time to get here, even if the games are still crap. So if we were to go to Web 2 first and then kind of like adopt some Web3 tooling, how is that solving anything though? Because most of the Web 2 companies using Web3, it's private chains, or they're not interoperable across chains or across platforms. And so like, what is that even solving for? And so I'm curious, like, what's your take on this coming from Web 2 or Web 3?
So do you want to? No, yeah. So I personally, I don't care about Web3 gaming because I've never seen a fun Web3 game yet. When it happens, I will enjoy it because I'm a gamer and I like playing games. I don't also think Web3 gaming is the way to onboard a lot of people because, I mean, honestly, if you put an average person in front of a game and ask them to move around with WASD keys, they're just going to be lost. And if you add wallet experiences on top of that, they're going to be even more lost. So this is why I think there's this disconnect. What we're solving for with Web 2 adopting Web 3 aspects in their games is if we do it right, so by doing it in a public blockchain, and by doing it by making these equipables and avatars and experiences cross-game compatible so that they see that they own their experience and that they can take their account with them, that they can get bonuses and perks in other games and kickstart their account in another game because they played another game. When they experience that, that's going to be something that kickstarts a good movement. But as long as we're using private chains or stuff like there I agreed we're not solving for anything by doing that. So I hope that whoever has, a relatively popular Web 2 game will actually just adopt some Web 3 aspect that can impress rather than grift people. So not add it as a monetization method, but actually as an experience upgrade. And that's how I think we can really solve and basically adopt at least some users. Yeah.
I agree here, but also what I think might happen, as you mentioned, private blockchain, private shards and everything, what I think might happen is that, for example, you have the big publishers, right? You have Activision and all the other ones who are there. They're going to start to implement, but they already have the retention of the user. They already have the users. They're going to implement some sort of a, potentially some sort of an interoperability between their different titles, as be that on the private blockchain, whatever it is. So people can trade across different, let's say, I don't know, I play Candy Crush, I have an avatar, and I can buy a skin with Call of Duty, and this skin is transferable to my avatar in Candy Crush. I think that might happen at first, but then later on, this can then go into the public blockchain essentially. But I didn't see any big publisher trying to tap into that market.
It's also not unreasonable to think that someone like Epic will actually run a private blockchain and try to do exactly that, make assets interoperable between their games. This, of course, is pointless because they can just do this on a database. And private blockchains are useful only for cartels. Like if you're a bunch of airline companies who don't like each other but have to trust each other, private blockchain is perfect. Banks, perfect. Nobody likes each other but have to trust each other. Amazing. But if they do it on a public blockchain, and if we sell them on the idea of earning more money with royalties and expanding their player base rather than this is you giving away your assets, this, I think, could convert some of them. But, you know, historically, they've been extremely hard to reach and convert because it's, at this point, a bunch of guys in suits making decisions and not exactly the developers and hackers anymore.
Any more questions?
In terms of governance, I think you are familiar with the question for Josip, with the non-DAO.
Yes.
What is the current state of their governance model? Because we know that governance model is generally heavy crisis for years now. So how is it? What's the current situation in non-DAO regarding governance?
Oh, in terms of the nouns in general, so nouns DAO governance model. Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, currently there's they did some fucked up shit. Can I say this? But essentially, they want to be fully decentralized. But the thing that they like fully decentralized DAO and stuff like that. But the thing that they did is that most of the people who bought the nouns essentially, you have delegation houses, and then you have 3 main delegation houses. Each of them have 50 to 70 nouns each, which means 50 to 70 votes. And then if you want a proposal, you need to beg the delegation house for the proposal to pass. So there's, they say that it's centralized, decentralized, but it's fully centralized at this point. It's broken. I mean, the DAO in general is questionable. We're building, so that's good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.